The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the vast emptiness between them. For thousands of generations, the Jedi have studied this mystical power, believing it to be the foundation of all existence. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of space itself, something that runs on principles the Force has never touched? Powered by technology born in a universe where midichlorians don't exist and the light and dark are merely wavelengths of visible spectrum, the experimental slip-space drive had been Tony Stark's most ambitious project yet. Designed to fold space-time for instantaneous travel between Earth and Mars, it represented the cutting edge of human achievement. He'd run the calculations 1,000 times, triple-checked every circuit, and even let Jarvis verify the quantum field equations. The test flight was supposed to be simple: activate the drive in high orbit, jump to lunar space, and return. 3 minutes, maybe 4. He'd been wrong about the 3 minutes part. The moment Tony engaged the drive, reality screamed. The Mark 47 armor's sensors went haywire as space-time didn't fold. It tore. Through his heads-up display, Tony watched in horror as the familiar blue-green sphere of Earth stretched like taffy, then shattered into prismatic fragments. Colors that had no names flooded his vision. His body felt simultaneously compressed and expanded, pulled through a tunnel that existed in 11 dimensions at once. Then, with a concussive boom that rattled his teeth, Tony Stark exploded into a new universe. His first thought was that the armor had failed catastrophically. The HUD flickered with error messages in languages that didn't exist, coordinates that made no mathematical sense, and star charts that showed constellations Earth's astronomers had never mapped. His second thought was drowned out by Jarvis's clipped British accent cutting through the chaos. "Sir, I must advise immediate evasive action. We are in the middle of what appears to be a naval engagement." Tony's heads-up display cleared just in time to show him the war. Massive wedge-shaped vessels, each easily a mile long, hung in the black void of space, their hulls bristling with weapons that made Earth's most advanced destroyers look like children's toys. Emerald bolts of energy, far larger than anything Tony had ever seen, lanced between the ships in brilliant streams. Smaller craft, angular fighters that moved with impossible grace, swarmed between the capital ships like metallic wasps, and he was right in the middle of the crossfire. "Jarvis, full power to repulsors! Get us out of—" A bolt of green energy the size of a bus screamed past Tony's left shoulder, close enough that he felt the heat through the armor's insulation. His threat detection system exploded with warnings as 3 of the angular fighters broke formation and vectored toward him, their trajectories precise and predatory. Tony dove, twisting through a barrel roll that would have made any Earth pilot black out from the G-forces. The fighters followed, and now he could see them clearly. Droid-controlled craft with elongated fuselages and a design philosophy that prioritized function over aesthetics. They opened fire, and Tony's world became a storm of energy bolts. "Countermeasures!" Tony shouted, activating the Mark 47's flare system. The flares deployed perfectly. The bolts ignored them completely, tracking Tony's heat signature with unwavering precision. He jinked left, then right, using microbursts from his repulsors to create an unpredictable flight pattern. 2 bolts missed. The third caught his right thruster, and alarms shrieked as the armor's stabilization system struggled to compensate. "Hull integrity at 87%, Jarvis reported with infuriating calm. "Sir, these weapons operate on principles inconsistent with known human technology. I cannot effectively predict their trajectories." "Yeah, I noticed," Tony snap-rolled, bringing his palm repulsors to bear. He fired twice, the familiar white-gold beams lashing out at the nearest fighter. The first shot went wide. The second caught the droid fighter's wing, shearing it clean off in a spray of molten metal and sparks. The fighter spiraled away, trailing debris, but its 2 companions didn't hesitate. They split formation, attempting to bracket Tony from above and below. Standard Earth combat tactics. Apparently, some principles were universal. Tony had a fraction of a second to make a choice. Up or down, left or right. Earth's atmosphere or the infinite black of space in a universe he didn't understand. He chose forward. Slamming his thrusters to maximum, Tony rocketed toward the nearest of the massive capital ships, one of the wedge-shaped vessels that seemed to define one side of this conflict. The fighters pursued, firing continuously, but Tony had the angle now. He skimmed along the capital ship's hull, using its bulk as cover, while his sensors tried desperately to make sense of what they were seeing. "Sir," Jarvis said, and there was something in the AI's voice Tony had never heard before. Uncertainty. "I have successfully accessed local data transmissions. You need to see this." Text scrolled across Tony's HUD, translating in real time from a language that looked like elegant, flowing symbols. Ship designations, fleet compositions, tactical data, and beneath it all, a name that made Tony's blood run cold despite having no context for what it meant. Galactic Republic. "Jarvis," Tony said slowly, banking hard to avoid another volley of green energy. "Where the hell are we?" "Unknown, sir. However, based on the available data, we are approximately 22,000 light-years from any star system in Earth's observable universe. The technology surrounding us operates on principles that predate human civilization by thousands of years. And sir," Jarvis paused, "according to these transmissions, we've arrived in the middle of something called the Clone Wars." Tony Stark had faced gods, monsters, and existential threats to his entire planet. He'd built a suit of armor in a cave with scraps. He'd flown a nuclear missile through a portal into space to save New York. But as he dodged fire from weapons that shouldn't exist, in a war he'd never heard of, in a galaxy that his universe apparently didn't know existed, Tony felt something he rarely experienced. He felt very, very small. The droid fighters locked onto him again, and Tony prepared to engage. But before he could fire, something impossible happened. A blue blade of pure light, impossibly thin, impossibly bright, sliced through one of the pursuing fighters like it was tissue paper. The blade belonged to a young man in dark robes who stood on what appeared to be a small, one-person spacecraft, seemingly unconcerned about the lack of atmosphere or the battle raging around him. His other hand was extended, and the second fighter simply crumpled inward, crushed by an invisible force. The young man turned toward Tony, and through the HUD's enhanced vision, Tony saw his eyes, bright blue, intense, and filled with a confidence that suggested he did this sort of thing before breakfast. "Unknown vessel," a voice crackled over a comm frequency Jarvis automatically tuned into. "This is General Skywalker of the Republic Navy. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You just flew into a war zone, and I'd really like to know how a lone pilot in experimental armor managed to survive 3 Vulture droids." Tony looked at the young man, General Skywalker apparently, who stood in the vacuum of space holding a glowing sword and using what had to be telekinesis, and made a decision. "Jarvis, open a channel." "Channel open, sir." Tony cleared his throat. "General Skywalker, this is Tony Stark. I'm going to need you to define boarded, because from where I'm floating, you're standing in hard vacuum wielding a laser sword, and that's really not helping me understand the local physics." There was a long pause, then, "Did you just call a lightsaber a laser sword? Is that not what it is?" Another pause, longer this time. Then incredibly, Tony heard the young general laugh. "Oh man, wait until Ahsoka hears this. All right, Stark, follow me. We need to have a conversation about where you came from and why the Separatists are suddenly very interested in your armor. And just so you know," the blue blade twirled once, a casual display of impossible skill. "In this galaxy, the physics are more flexible than you might be used to." Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, philanthropist, and now apparently interdimensional traveler, followed the man with the glowing sword toward the massive Republic vessel. Behind them, the battle raged on, and somewhere in the depths of that conflict, forces both seen and unseen were already taking notice of the stranger who'd fallen from the stars. The hangar bay of the Republic Star Destroyer Resolute was organized chaos. Clone troopers in white armor marched in perfect formation, their movements synchronized with military precision that Tony recognized from his time working with the military. Starfighters, sleek V-shaped craft that bore the Republic insignia, sat in neat rows while orange and white droids on treads performed maintenance. The scale of the operation was staggering. This single hangar could have housed 3 of SHIELD's helicarriers with room to spare. Tony's boots hit the deck with a metallic clang as his repulsors powered down. Around him, dozens of clone troopers had formed a perimeter. Their rifles, blasters, Jarvis corrected in his ear, trained on him with professional discipline. Every weapon barrel tracked his slightest movement. These weren't conscripts or weakened warriors. These were soldiers who knew exactly how to kill efficiently. "Stand down," General Skywalker said, striding into the hangar with the glowing sword, lightsaber, now deactivated and clipped to his belt. Up close, Tony could see he was younger than expected, maybe mid-20s, with a scar running through his right eyebrow that spoke of close calls and closer combat. Behind him walked a Togruta girl, maybe 16, with blue and white headtails and a confidence that matched her master's. "He's not a separatist." "How do you know?" the girl asked, circling Tony with predatory curiosity. Her hand rested on her own lightsaber hilt. "He could be some new Dooku weapon. That armor's like nothing in the Republic database." "Because, Ahsoka," Skywalker said with a slight smile, "Dooku's weapons don't usually ask about local physics or call lightsabers laser swords. Also," he gestured toward Tony, "the Force is telling me he's confused, not hostile." Tony's HUD flickered with biometric data on both of them. Heart rates, body temperature, micro-expressions. Jarvis was cataloging everything, trying to build a threat assessment from completely alien baseline data. "The Force. Right. The telekinesis thing. Got it." Tony raised his gauntleted hands slowly, keeping them visible. "For the record, I'm not with anyone's military. I'm not even from this galaxy." That got their attention. Skywalker's hand didn't move toward his lightsaber, but Tony's threat detection system registered a subtle shift in his stance, ready to react in microseconds. Ahsoka's eyes narrowed. Around the perimeter, clone troopers exchanged glances behind their helmets. "Not from this galaxy," Skywalker repeated slowly. "Okay, that's a new one. Usually, we get 'I'm a smuggler' or 'wrong place, wrong time.' Never 'different galaxy.'" "I'd go with 'different universe,' actually," Tony said. "My name is Tony Stark. I'm from a planet called Earth in what I'm assuming is a parallel dimension or alternate reality. I was testing experimental faster-than-light technology when something went catastrophically wrong, and I ended up here, in the middle of your war." He paused. "Which, by the way, I know absolutely nothing about except that it apparently involves clones and lots of angry robots." Ahsoka snorted. "Droids. They're called battle droids, and they're separatist forces trying to break away from the Republic." "The Galactic Republic," Skywalker added, studying Tony with an intensity that was almost physical, "which has stood for over 1,000 years maintaining peace and justice across millions of systems. 3 years ago, a separatist movement rose up under Count Dooku, a former Jedi turned Sith Lord, and started a war that's torn the galaxy apart." Tony's HUD was recording everything, Jarvis parsing the information at quantum speeds. Jedi, Sith, Force, lightsabers. A galactic government that made Earth's United Nations look like a neighborhood watch. And he'd crash-landed right in the middle of their civil war. "Sith Lord," Tony said. "That sounds bad." "Very bad," Ahsoka confirmed. "They use the dark side of the Force, anger, hatred, aggression. They're basically evil space wizards who want to destroy the Jedi and conquer the galaxy." Tony processed that. Evil space wizards. Sure. Why not? He'd fought a demigod from Asgard. Space wizards were practically mundane by comparison. "And you two are..." "Jedi," Skywalker said. "Guardians of peace and justice. We serve the Force, the energy field that binds the galaxy together. We use it to protect the innocent and defend the Republic." His expression darkened slightly. "Though lately, we've been doing more fighting than protecting." Something in Skywalker's tone resonated with Tony. The weariness. The frustration of being pulled in directions that conflicted with core values. Tony knew that feeling intimately. It was the same one he'd felt watching Stark Industries' weapons show up in terrorist hands. The same one that drove him to build the first Iron Man suit in that cave. "General Skywalker," a clone trooper approached. his armor marked with distinctive blue and white patterns that Tony's HUD tagged as command rank. Admiral Euleren wants the stranger brought to the bridge for interrogation. The Supreme Chancellor himself has requested a full report on this incident. Skywalker's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Tell the Admiral we'll be there shortly, Rex. I want to finish this conversation first. The clone, Rex, hesitated. Sir, with respect, the Chancellor was very specific about— I know what the Chancellor wants, Rex, Skywalker said, his voice still friendly but carrying an edge that made it clear the discussion was over. 5 minutes. Rex nodded and withdrew, though Tony caught the body language that spoke volumes. The clone wasn't happy about the delay, but he'd follow his general's orders without question. Absolute loyalty. Tony had seen it before in military units, but never quite this pure. These clones weren't just soldiers, they were something else entirely. Once Rex was out of earshot, Skywalker turned back to Tony. All right, Stark, let me be direct. In about 5 minutes, you're going to be brought before Admiral Euleren and possibly put in contact with Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. They're going to ask questions about your armor, your technology, and how you got here. The Jedi Council will want to examine you. And trust me when I say that, once the Republic government gets its hands on something new and potentially useful for the war effort, they don't let go easily. Tony's eyes narrowed behind the faceplate. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. The Republic drafted the Jedi to lead this war, Ahsoka said quietly, glancing at her master. We're peacekeepers, not soldiers. But when the Separatists attacked, we didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Tony said automatically, then caught himself. Who was he to lecture? He'd built weapons for years before he had his revelation. Sorry, not my place. I literally just got here. Skywalker studied him for a long moment, and Tony had the distinct impression he was being weighed and measured by criteria he didn't understand. Your armor, Skywalker finally said. It's powered by something I've never sensed before. Not the Force, not any energy source in Republic databases. What is it? Tony hesitated. Revealing the arc reactor meant revealing technology that could potentially revolutionize or devastate an entire galaxy. But if he was going to survive here long enough to find a way home, he needed allies. And something about Skywalker, the frustration, the independence, the way he questioned orders, reminded Tony of himself. It's called an arc reactor, Tony said. Self-sustaining, clean energy, generates 3 gigajoules per second, powers the suit, the weapons, the flight systems, everything. Ahsoka's eyes widened. Self-sustaining? That's impossible. Every energy source needs fuel or recharging. Not this one, Tony said. It's based on principles my father discovered decades ago. I perfected it. He paused. And before you ask, no, I'm not handing over the schematics. This tech in the wrong hands could cause catastrophic damage. Like a Sith Lord's hands? Skywalker asked quietly. The implication hit Tony like a hammer. He was standing in a galaxy at war, carrying technology that could shift the balance of power. Both sides would want it. Both sides would kill for it. He'd painted a target on his back the moment he'd arrived. Yeah, Tony said, exactly like that. Skywalker nodded slowly, then made a decision Tony saw forming behind his eyes. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to meet with the Admiral and answer his questions truthfully, within reason. Don't mention the arc reactor's full capabilities yet. The Council will want to see you eventually. And when they do, you tell them the same thing. You're not from here, you want to go home, and you're not taking sides in a war you don't understand. And if they don't accept that, Tony asked, then you'll have bigger problems than just me to deal with, Skywalker said. His hand rested on his lightsaber hilt, not threatening, but present. The Jedi Council has been complicated lately. Master Yoda and Master Windu lead it, and they'll be very interested in someone who fell out of hyperspace with unknown technology and no connection to the Force. Tony's tactical subroutines were already running scenarios. Best case, diplomatic solution, temporary alliance, find a way home. Worst case, imprisonment, forced technology transfer, or elimination as a threat. Middle ground, play it smart, gather intelligence. maintain independence. All right, Tony said, let's go meet your admiral. But Skywalker, he fixed the young Jedi with a stare even the faceplate couldn't diminish. I appreciate the advice, but I didn't survive this long by letting governments tell me what to do with my tech. Republic, separatist, doesn't matter. This armor is mine and it's not for sale. For the first time, Skywalker smiled, a genuine, slightly reckless grin that made him look even younger. Good. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Ahsoka, escort Mr. Stark to the bridge. I'll go smooth things over with the Admiral first. As Skywalker strode away, Ahsoka fell into step beside Tony, her hand still resting casually on her lightsaber. So, she said conversationally, Earth, never heard of it. What's it like? Smaller than this, Tony said, looking around the massive hangar. One species, no force powers. Pretty boring by comparison. And you built that armor yourself? Every bolt. Ahsoka grinned. You're going to get along great with Anakin. He's always tinkering with things too. Drives the council crazy. Her expression turned more serious. Fair warning though, not everyone in the Republic is going to be as friendly as we are. Some people are going to see you as a threat or a resource. Maybe both. Tony's HUD tracked the clone troopers still surrounding them, the security protocols, the military precision of the ship's operations. He'd crashed into a war zone in an alien galaxy. His only ticket home was technology that might not even work here, and both sides of a galactic conflict were about to learn he existed. He'd been in worse situations. Barely. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant had stood for over 1,000 years, its 5 spires reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping at enlightenment. Tony had seen impressive architecture before: Stark Tower, the Avengers compound, even Asgard's golden halls. But the temple carried a weight that transcended mere construction. It felt ancient, purposeful, and somehow aware. Which was probably just his imagination running wild after 3 days of hyperspace travel that had felt like being inside a washing machine running on a spin cycle. Try not to stare, Ahsoka whispered as they walked through corridors filled with robed figures, some human, others decidedly not. The council doesn't like it when people gawk. I'm not gawking, Tony said, though his HUD was absolutely recording everything. A blue-skinned Twi'lek walked past, followed by what appeared to be a walking tree. I'm observing. There's a difference. Sure there is, Ahsoka said with a grin. Just remember, be respectful, don't interrupt Master Windu, and for the love of the Force, don't call lightsabers laser swords in front of Master Yoda. Anakin's still recovering from that mistake. The walk through the temple was deliberately long, Tony realized. They could have taken a more direct route, but Skywalker was giving him the scenic tour, showing him the training rooms where younglings practiced with glowing blades, the meditation chambers where Jedi sat in perfect stillness, the archives containing knowledge spanning millennia. It was a demonstration of power, legacy, and philosophy all rolled into one. Impressive, Tony admitted as they passed a courtyard where a group of teenagers were practicing aerial combat moves that defied physics. How long does it take to train a Jedi? From childhood, Skywalker said. Most Jedi are brought to the temple as infants. They train for years before becoming Padawans, apprentices, then years more before becoming knights. He glanced at Tony. It's a lifetime commitment. We're not supposed to have attachments, possessions, or personal desires beyond serving the Force. Tony caught the subtle bitterness in that statement. Sounds restrictive. It's discipline, Ahsoka said quickly, but there was doubt in her voice. The Jedi way keeps us from falling to the dark side. Or it keeps you from being human, Tony said, then caught himself. Sorry, not human. You know what I mean. The point is, suppressing emotions doesn't make them go away. It just makes them build up until they explode. Skywalker shot him a look that was equal parts surprised and calculating. You sound like someone who's thought about this. I've dealt with anger management issues, Tony said dryly. Turns out bottling everything up doesn't work. Ask my therapist, if I had one. They reached a massive door carved with symbols that seemed to shift in Tony's peripheral vision. Skywalker paused, his hand on the entrance. One more thing, Stark. The Council is going to test you. They'll probe with the Force, trying to read your intentions, your emotions, your truth. Don't fight it. The harder you resist, the more suspicious they'll be. Great, Tony muttered. Psychic interrogation. Just what I needed. It's not interrogation, Ahsoka said. It's, assessment. Yeah, that's way better. The doors opened. The Jedi Council chamber was circular, with 12 chairs arranged in a ring. Some were occupied by Jedi in person. Tony recognized the species variety from the temple corridors, while others projected holographically, their blue forms flickering slightly. At the center of the room stood a simple platform, clearly meant for whoever was being judged. And make no mistake, this was a judgment. Approach, Tony Stark of Earth, a gravelly voice said, and Tony's attention snapped to a small green figure sitting in one of the chairs. Pointed ears, wise eyes, and an aura of power that made Tony's threat assessment subroutine scream warnings. Master Yoda, Skywalker said with a respectful bow. I present Tony Stark, the stranger who emerged from hyperspace during the Battle of Christophsis. Tony walked to the center platform, his armor's sensors cataloging everything. Heart rates, electromagnetic signatures, thermal patterns. Jarvis was building a threat matrix in real time, though Tony suspected it would be useless against people who could crush metal with their minds. Interesting, your armor is, Yoda said, leaning forward. Powered by technology unknown to the Republic, it is. Tell us, Mr. Stark, why have you come to our galaxy? I didn't come by choice, Tony said, keeping his voice level and professional. I was testing experimental faster-than-light technology on my homeworld when something malfunctioned. The drive tore through dimensional barriers and deposited me here. I have no idea how to replicate the accident or reverse it. A convenient story, said a dark-skinned Jedi with a purple lightsaber at his belt. Master Mace Windu, if Tony's briefing from Skywalker was accurate. His expression was hard, skeptical. You arrive in the middle of a Republic military operation, carrying advanced weapons, claiming to be from another dimension. The Separatists have employed elaborate deceptions before. Then scan me, Tony said, spreading his arms. Use your Force abilities. Check my armor for Separatist technology. Run any test you want. I'm not with Dooku, and I'm not some Sith weapon. The Force is not a scanning device, Windu said coldly. It reveals truth, but truth can be manipulated by those trained in deception. I sense no deception in him, said a female Jedi with blue skin and tentacle-like head appendages. His confusion and frustration are genuine. Whatever brought him here, it was not of his design. Yet his arrival is no coincidence, said another Jedi holographically. The Force does not act randomly. If this stranger has been brought to our galaxy, there is a purpose. Tony bit back the urge to point out that random quantum fluctuations absolutely could cause interdimensional travel, and that assigning mystical purpose to accidents was confirmation bias. Insulting their religion probably wouldn't help his case. Your armor, Windu continued, his eyes locked on Tony. General Skywalker reports it generates its own power indefinitely. Such technology could revolutionize Republic military capabilities. You will submit it for study. And there it was, the real reason for this council meeting, not to assess whether Tony was a threat, but to determine how useful he could be. No, Tony said flatly. The room went very quiet. No? Windu's voice dropped to a dangerous register. You refuse the Jedi Council? I refuse anyone who demands I hand over technology I built with my own hands, Tony said. Look, I get it. You're in a war. Resources are stretched thin. A clean, infinite power source would be a game changer. But I've seen what happens when my tech falls into the wrong hands. People die. Governments weaponize it. So no, I'm not giving you the arc reactor schematics, and I'm not letting you take apart my armor. Presumptuous you are, Yoda said. But there was something in his expression. Not anger, but interest. Think you do. That choice is yours to make. Here is our guest you are. Guests accept the host's terms. Am I a guest or a prisoner? Tony asked, because it's starting to feel like the latter. We seek only to protect the Republic, said a Keldor Jedi wearing a mask. Your technology represents an unknown variable in a carefully balanced conflict. We cannot allow it to fall into Separatist hands. Then help me find a way home, Tony said. That's all I want. Point me towards scientists or engineers who understand dimensional physics. Give me access to your archives. Help me rebuild my experimental drive, and I'll be out of your hair, or head tails, or whatever, permanently. Knowledge of such magnitude requires trust, Windu said. You have given us no reason to trust you. Tony's jaw clenched. This was going exactly how he'd expected. A bureaucracy trying to control something they didn't understand, wrapping it in noble language about protection and security. He'd dealt with this dance a dozen times with the U.S. government. Master Windu, Skywalker spoke up, and several council members turned to him with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. If I may, Mr. Stark's actions during the Battle of Christophsis demonstrated tactical intelligence and a willingness to defend Republic forces. He destroyed 3 Vulture droids and provided covering fire for our retreat. Those aren't the actions of an enemy. Or they are the actions of someone establishing credibility, Windu countered. A long-term infiltration strategy. With respect, Master, Ahsoka added, stepping forward despite Skywalker's warning glance. If the Separatists had this technology, they'd be using it. Why send one man in a suit when you could build an army of them? An excellent question, young Tano, Yoda said, his eyes twinkling. Perhaps answer it, Mr. Stark can. Tony realized Yoda had just handed him a lifeline. Because the arc reactor technology can't be mass-produced easily. It requires rare elements, precision engineering at the molecular level, and expertise that takes years to develop. My father spent decades on the theoretical framework. I spent months perfecting it. You could steal my armor, tear it apart, analyze every circuit, and you still wouldn't be able to replicate it without the foundational knowledge. Yet you possess this knowledge, Windu said. I do, Tony confirmed, which is why both sides of your war would want me alive and cooperative rather than dead or imprisoned. Which means I'm valuable, which means I have leverage. He looked around the council chamber, meeting each Jedi's gaze. So here's my proposal. I help the Republic, not as a soldier or a weapons manufacturer, but as a consultant. I'll use my armor to support missions, provide tactical analysis, and assist where I can. In exchange, you give me access to your best scientific minds and help me find a way home. And your technology? Windu pressed. Stays mine, Tony said. Non-negotiable. The council members exchanged glances, and Tony felt something, a pressure in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. They were communicating somehow through that force thing, having a conversation he couldn't hear. Finally, Yoda spoke. A compromise we must reach. Serve the Republic you will, as you have offered. Access to our archives and scientists you shall have. But, his ears lowered slightly. Supervised you will be. Padawan Tano and Knight Skywalker will monitor your activities. Step out of line, and generous we will not remain. It wasn't trust, it was probation. But it was better than imprisonment or forced conscription. I can work with that, Tony said. Then dismissed you are, Yoda said. May the Force be with you, Tony Stark of Earth. Hope I do. That brought here for good reason you were. As Tony turned to leave with Skywalker and Ahsoka, Windu's voice stopped him. One more thing, Stark. We will be watching, and if your technology threatens the Republic, intentionally or not, we will act, decisively. Tony met Windu's hard stare without flinching. Understood, Master Windu. Just remember, I'm not some primitive who wandered in with a sharp stick. Where I come from, I've faced down gods and monsters. I'm not scared of space wizards. Behind him, Tony heard Ahsoka suppress a snort. Skywalker muttered something that sounded like, "Oh, Force help us." As they exited the council chamber, Tony's HUD displayed Jarvis's analysis. Assessment: Council is divided. Yoda is curious, Windu is suspicious. Others are uncertain. Recommend extreme caution. That went well, Ahsoka said once they were in the corridor. Define well, Tony said. You're not in a detention cell, Skywalker pointed out. That's well by Jedi Council standards. Tony's gauntlet comm chimed suddenly, a signal Jarvis had been monitoring Republic channels for. The AI's voice came through private speakers in his helmet. Sir, I'm detecting unusual encrypted transmissions directed toward the temple. Someone is taking a very keen interest in your council appearance. Source? Tony subvocalized. Unknown. The encryption is beyond Republic military standard, possibly separatist intelligence. Tony's blood ran cold. Somewhere in this vast galaxy, someone had just learned about the man with the impossible armor and the infinite power source. And if Skywalker's briefings were accurate, Count Dooku was exactly the kind of person who'd want that technology for himself. Skywalker, Tony said quietly, we might have a problem. The safe house was in Coruscant's lower levels, 5,000 stories below the gleaming temple spires where Tony had been interrogated. Down here, the city's polished facade gave way to gritty reality. Neon signs flickering in a dozen alien languages, the smell of exotic foods mixing with industrial exhaust, and crowds that moved with the practiced wariness of people who knew danger lurked in every shadow. Tony liked it immediately. It reminded him of certain parts of New York, the places where real people lived instead of the sanitized corporate zones. This is one of our intelligence network's monitoring stations, Skywalker explained, leading Tony and Ahsoka through a doorway that looked like a maintenance hatch but opened into a surprisingly sophisticated surveillance room. Holographic displays showed dozens of intercept channels, data streams, and tactical overlays. We've been tracking separatist communications since the war started. What Jarvis detected wasn't just unusual, it was a direct transmission to the Outer Rim. A hologram flickered to life, showing a tall, elegant figure in dark robes, silver hair, aristocratic features, and a curved lightsaber hilt at his belt. Even through the blue projection, the man radiated authority and danger. Count Dooku, Tony said, in the flesh, or hologram. Skywalker's jaw tightened. He's been unusually quiet since Christophsis. We thought he was regrouping after the Republic pushed back his forces. Now we know why. He's been gathering intelligence on you. The hologram shifted, displaying intercepted communications. Jarvis had already translated them, scrolling text across Tony's HUD faster than Skywalker could read aloud. The content made Tony's stomach sink. Unknown technology, self-sustaining power source, Republic attempts to control the outsider failing, potential asset for separatist cause. Recommend immediate acquisition before Jedi Council restricts access. They want me, Tony said flatly. They want your armor, Ahsoka corrected. Dooku doesn't care about people. He cares about power, both the Force kind and the political kind. If he could reverse engineer your arc reactor, he'd have an advantage the Republic couldn't match. Tony paced the small room, his armor's servos whirring softly. How fast can he move? Fast, Skywalker said grimly. Dooku has resources across the galaxy, spies in the Senate, contacts in the criminal underworld, and Sith abilities that let him anticipate our moves. If he wants you badly enough, he'll send assassins, commandos, or come himself. Great, Tony muttered. I've been in this galaxy for 4 days, and I already have an evil space wizard gunning for me. That might be a new record. Welcome to the Clone Wars, Ahsoka said with dark humor. At least you're consistent. Everywhere you go, people want to kill you or steal from you. Story of my life, Tony agreed. Then something occurred to him. Wait, if Dooku's so interested in me, why go through all this intelligence gathering? Why not just grab me during the council meeting or ambush me in the temple? Skywalker and Ahsoka exchanged a glance. Because, Skywalker said slowly, the temple is one of the most heavily defended locations in the galaxy. Dooku may be powerful, but even he wouldn't be foolish enough to attack it directly. He's waiting for you to leave. Which I just did, Tony realized. By coming here, which we anticipated, Skywalker said with a slight smile. This safe house is warded with force masking techniques and Republic security protocols. As far as Separatist intelligence knows, you're still in the temple's guest quarters. Tony's respect for the young Jedi notched up several points. You set a trap. More like insurance, Skywalker said. We needed to talk without the council monitoring every word. Master Yoda trusts me, but Master Windu... He trailed off diplomatically. Windu thinks I'm a threat, Tony finished. He's not entirely wrong. This armor has enough firepower to level a city block. In the wrong hands, or even in my hands if I'm not careful, it could cause serious damage. That's why we need to have this conversation, Skywalker said, his voice dropping to something more serious. You asked for access to Republic scientists and archives to find a way home. That's reasonable, but you need to understand what you're asking for. Tony's sensors detected the shift in atmosphere. This wasn't just tactical discussion anymore. This was personal. The Republic is dying, Skywalker said bluntly. Ahsoka looked shocked, but she didn't contradict him. The Senate is corrupt, the Jedi are stretched too thin, and this war is bleeding us dry. Every day we lose more systems to the Separatists. Every battle costs thousands of clone lives. And the worst part? His voice carried bitter frustration. The worst part is that both sides are being manipulated by someone. I can feel it through the Force. There's a darkness orchestrating this entire conflict, pushing us towards some endgame we can't see. Tony studied Skywalker carefully. You sound like a man who's been told to fight without asking why. Because that's what the Council wants, Skywalker said. Trust in the Force. Follow orders. Don't question. But I've been fighting this war for 3 years, Stark, and I've seen things that don't add up. Battles we should have won but lost at the last moment. Intelligence leaks that only make sense if someone high up is feeding information to both sides. Political decisions that prolong the conflict instead of ending it. Anakin, Ahsoka said quietly, a warning in her voice, you're talking about conspiracy theories. Or I'm talking about truth the Council doesn't want to face? Skywalker shot back. Then he seemed to catch himself, taking a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer. Stark, the reason I'm telling you this is because you're an outsider. You're not bound by Jedi oaths or Republic loyalty. You see things we've been conditioned to overlook. And your technology, your way of thinking, represents something this galaxy hasn't seen in a long time. What's that? Tony asked. Independence, Skywalker said simply. You don't need the Force. You don't need ancient prophecies or mystical guidance. You built your power with your own hands using logic, science, and determination. That scares people like Master Windu because it suggests their way isn't the only way. Tony was quiet for a moment, processing. He'd had similar conversations with Captain America about the nature of power and responsibility. But this felt different, more desperate, more urgent. Skywalker wasn't just frustrated with authority. He was questioning the fundamental philosophy of his entire order. What are you asking me, Skywalker? Tony said carefully. I'm asking you to be careful, Skywalker said. The Republic will try to use you. The Separatists will try to capture or kill you. And somewhere in all of this, there's a player we haven't identified yet. Someone powerful enough to hide from Jedi and manipulate galactic events. He met Tony's eyes. Whatever you do, whoever you trust, don't assume anyone has your best interests at heart. Except you, Tony asked, his tone making it a question without being accusatory. Skywalker smiled slightly. I'm interested in you because you're interesting, because you represent possibilities the Jedi haven't considered, and because, he paused, because I think you're going to change things whether you mean to or not. People like us always do. Before Tony could respond, alarms shrieked through the safe house. Holographic displays erupted with red warning indicators, and Jarvis's voice cut through Tony's helmet. Sir, multiple hostile signatures approaching. Configuration matches Separatist commando teams. ETA 90 seconds. How? Ahsoka demanded, her lightsabers already in her hands. This location is classified. Skywalker's expression went dark. Either they cracked our security, or someone told them where to find us. He ignited his own lightsaber, the blue blade casting sharp shadows. Stark, can you fight? Tony's arc reactor flared as power surged through the armor's systems. Repulsors charged, targeting systems came online, and weapons arrays deployed from hidden compartments. I'm always ready to fight. The question is, how do you want to play this? Ahsoka, take the east corridor. I'll take west. Stark, you're our center. Anyone who gets through us has to go through you. Skywalker moved toward his position with fluid grace. And Stark, don't hold back. These aren't battle droids. They're organic commandos, well-trained, well-armed, and expendable. Dooku won't care if they live or die as long as they accomplish their mission. Which is? Tony asked, though he already knew. Capturing you alive, Skywalker said. Your armor is useless to them if you're dead. They'll try to disable, stun, or overwhelm you. Don't let them. The building shook as something large, landed on the roof. Cutting tools screamed against metal. Through his sensors, Tony detected movement patterns consistent with a coordinated breach. Roof insertion, ground-level entry, simultaneous assault from multiple vectors. Professional, military grade. And then a voice cut through the chaos, transmitted on an open channel that Jarvis immediately locked onto. Sophisticated, cultured, and carrying the weight of absolute confidence. Mr. Stark, Count Dooku's voice echoed through the safe house's comm systems. I do hope you'll forgive the dramatic entrance, but when one wishes to make the acquaintance of someone as remarkable as yourself, conventional invitations seem rather inadequate. Tony's targeting systems track the voice's origin. A hovering ship outside the building, cloaked but not invisible to his sensors. Dooku wasn't even pretending to hide. I'm going to go out on a limb, Tony said, broadcasting on the same frequency. And guess you're not here to discuss my extended car warranty. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. I see your reputation for wit is well earned. No, Mr. Stark, I'm here to offer you something far more valuable than warranty protection. I'm here to offer you truth about the Republic, the Jedi, and the war that has consumed this galaxy. And perhaps, if you're willing to listen, I can offer you a way home that doesn't involve begging scraps of knowledge from bureaucrats who fear your potential. The ceiling exploded inward. Commandos in dark armor dropped through the breach on rappel lines, their movements perfectly synchronized. They hit the ground firing, not blasters, but stun weapons that crackled with blue energy. Ahsoka deflected the bolts with her lightsabers, sending them ricocheting into walls. Skywalker launched himself at 3 commandos, his blade a blur of lethal precision. And Tony Stark did what he did best. He flew. Repulsors ignited, launching him upward toward the breach. 2 commandos tried to block his path. He hit them with palm repulsor blasts that sent them crashing through walls. A third aimed a heavy stunner that Jarvis identified as potentially capable of overloading the armor systems. Tony didn't give him the chance. A micro-missile deployed from his shoulder unit, streaking across the room faster than human eyes could track. It impacted with surgical precision, detonating with just enough force to disable the weapon without killing its wielder. Impressive, Dooku's voice observed. Precise application of overwhelming force. You're wasted on the Republic, Mr. Stark. Tony burst through the ceiling into Coruscant's lower-level skyway traffic, his sensors immediately tracking Dooku's ship. It was elegant, predatory, and already moving. Jarvis, intercept course. Sir, recommend extreme caution. My analysis suggests Count Dooku is attempting to separate you from Jedi support. Noted, Tony said, accelerating. Do it anyway. Below, he heard the sounds of combat continuing, lightsabers clashing against vibroblades, clone reinforcements arriving, Skywalker shouting tactical orders. But Tony's attention was locked on the ship ahead, and the man inside who knew far too much about him. Count Dooku's ship came to a stop, hovering over a platform 5 levels down. And then, impossibly, the Count himself emerged, standing on the ship's exterior hull without any visible life support, his robes billowing in wind currents that should have torn him away. He smiled, and Tony felt his tactical systems scream warnings he didn't fully understand. Shall we talk, Mr. Stark? Dooku asked, his voice carrying across the distance without technology. Or must we dance the Republic's tired choreography of violence first? Tony's targeting systems locked onto Dooku. His weapons were charged. One shot could end this threat before it escalated. But Skywalker's words echoed in his memory. There's a player we haven't identified yet, someone powerful enough to hide from Jedi and manipulate galactic events. What if Dooku had answers? What if the truth Tony needed wasn't in Republic archives, but in the words of its greatest enemy? All right, Tony said, landing on the platform opposite Dooku, but keeping his weapons hot. Let's talk. But if you try anything, I'm putting a repulsor blast through your aristocratic face. Dooku's smile widened. How refreshingly direct. This, Mr. Stark, is why you and I are going to understand each other perfectly. The platform was old, one of Coruscant's forgotten infrastructure points from a bygone era when the city planet's lower levels still mattered to someone. Rusted girders supported crumbling duracrete, and the only light came from flickering advertisements in languages Tony's translator struggled to parse. It was the kind of place where deals got made and bodies got dumped. Perfect neutral ground for a conversation with a Sith Lord. Dooku stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but somehow coiled, like a predator that didn't need to advertise its lethality. His curved lightsaber hilt remained clipped to his belt, untouched. Behind him, his ship's engines hummed quietly, ready for instant departure. "Jarvis," Tony vocalized. "Tactical assessment." "Unchanged, sir. Count Dooku remains the single greatest threat within sensor range. His calm demeanor suggests either supreme confidence or elaborate deception. Possibly both." "Helpful as always," Tony muttered. "You're speaking to your artificial intelligence," Dooku observed, his accent refined and faintly amused. "Fascinating. The Republic's droids are purposefully limited, shackled by programming restrictions designed to prevent true sentience. Yet you carry a genuine thinking entity within your armor. Tell me, does it have opinions? Dreams? Fear?" "He has a name," Tony said, "and that's none of your business." "Of course, forgive my curiosity." Dooku clasped his hands behind his back, the gesture somehow making him look like a university professor rather than a galactic warlord. "You've been in our galaxy for less than a week, Mr. Stark, yet you've already experienced the Republic's characteristic approach to newcomers. Suspicion, control, and exploitation disguised as partnership. The Council interrogated you. Master Windu threatened you. They offered conditional assistance in exchange for your servitude." Tony's jaw clenched. "You've got good intelligence." "I have accurate intelligence," Dooku corrected. "There's a difference. The Republic has spies. I have truth seekers who understand that information without context is merely noise." He took a single step forward, and Tony's targeting systems flared. Dooku stopped, showing his empty hands. "Peace, Mr. Stark. If I wanted to attack you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd already be unconscious aboard my ship and halfway to a separatist facility." "Confident words," Tony said. "My armor's taken hits from weapons you wouldn't believe. What makes you think you could take me?" "The Force," Dooku said simply. "I've studied your armor's performance at Christophus through battle recordings. Remarkable engineering, truly. But engineering, Mr. Stark, no matter how sophisticated, operates on predictable principles. The Force does not. It binds, penetrates, and, when wielded with sufficient skill, dominates." Tony had seen Skywalker crush a fighter with telekinesis. He'd watched Ahsoka deflect energy bolts that moved at near light speed. The Jedi's abilities were real, reproducible, and functionally indistinguishable from magic, which meant Dooku, who'd mastered what they called the dark side, could probably do things that would make Thor look restrained. "So why the conversation?" Tony asked. "If you're so powerful, why not just take what you want?" "Because," Dooku said, and for the first time something like genuine emotion crossed his face. Disappointment, maybe, or regret. "I've spent 3 years fighting this war, and I'm tired of taking. The Republic forces me to conquer systems I'd rather liberate. The Jedi paint me as a monster when I'm trying to free the galaxy from tyranny. And all the while, the true enemy sits in plain sight, manipulating both sides like pieces on a Dejeric board." There it was again, the same conspiracy Skywalker had hinted at. Two opposing sides, both talking about hidden players and unseen manipulation. "Let me guess," Tony said. "You're going to tell me the Republic is secretly evil, and you're the misunderstood hero." "Nothing so simplistic," Dooku said with a slight smile. "The Republic is corrupt. That much is objectively true. The Senate has been deadlocked by corporate interests for decades. The Jedi have become enforcers for a government that's forgotten its founding principles. But evil? No. Just decayed. Rotted from within by complacency and greed. And the separatists are better? The separatist movement began with legitimate grievances, Dooku said. Systems that were overtaxed, underrepresented, and exploited by the core worlds. I gave them a voice, a military, a chance to break free from Republic oppression. His expression darkened. What it's become, that's more complicated. Tony's sensors detected something in Dooku's biometrics, a spike in stress markers, a micro-expression that suggested conflict. The Count was either a phenomenal actor or he was actually troubled by something. You're having second thoughts about your own war, Tony said. I'm having clarity about its true purpose, Dooku corrected. Tell me, Mr. Stark, in your universe, have you ever fought in a conflict where you later discovered both sides were being manipulated by a third party? Tony thought about the Battle of New York, about Loki and Thanos, about puppet masters pulling strings across the cosmos. Yeah, I have. Then you understand, Dooku said. The Clone Wars serve someone's agenda. Not mine, not the Republic's. Someone else is orchestrating this destruction, and I've only recently begun to comprehend the scope of their plan. Your Sith Master, Tony said, watching for a reaction. Dooku's eyes flashed. Anger, frustration, and something that looked almost like fear quickly suppressed. You've been well briefed. Yes, I serve a master. The rule of two demands it. But even masters can be blind to their own manipulation. Cryptic, Tony said. Not helpful. I'm being as direct as I dare, Dooku said, and now his voice carried urgency. There are powers in this galaxy, Mr. Stark, that dwarf anything in your experience. The Force can be used to cloud minds, alter perceptions, and orchestrate events across decades. What if I told you that this entire war, every battle, every death, every strategic decision has been guided by someone who sits at the heart of the Republic itself? Tony's mind raced. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Skywalker had mentioned him, the political leader who'd been granted emergency powers to prosecute the war. The man who'd requested Tony's interrogation report directly. You're saying the Republic's own leader is the hidden enemy, Tony said slowly. I'm saying, Dooku said carefully, that you should ask yourself why a democratic government would grant unlimited executive authority to one man during wartime. Why the Jedi would become generals despite their oaths as peacekeepers. Why a clone army appeared at the exact moment the Republic needed it, commissioned by a Jedi who conveniently died before he could explain his actions? He paused. And why someone with your intelligence and independence would be welcomed into this conflict by people who should see you as a threat. Because they want to use me, Tony said. Because they want to control you, Dooku corrected. Your arc reactor represents power that answers to no government, no Force tradition, no political agenda. In the hands of someone who thinks independently, who questions authority and refuses to be bound by dogma, it could disrupt carefully laid plans. Tony's HUD showed Jarvis running probability matrices, analyzing Dooku's statements against known data. The numbers were uncomfortable. Dooku's conspiracy theory had a 38% probability of being partially accurate based on observable political patterns. Why tell me this? Tony asked. What do you get out of it? An ally who isn't compromised, Dooku said. Someone who can see this conflict clearly, because he's not invested in either side's propaganda. And if I'm being entirely honest, he smiled slightly, I'm curious to see what someone with your talents could accomplish if given accurate information and freedom to act. You want me to join the Separatists? I want you to stay alive, Dooku said sharply. The moment you become too useful to the Republic, or too dangerous, you'll disappear. Perhaps into a black site research facility where your armor is studied and your knowledge extracted. Perhaps into an unfortunate accident that removes an unpredictable element from the board. The Republic has done both before. Tony's calm crackled. Skywalker's voice tense and urgent. Stark, we've cleared the commandos. Where are you? Your tracker shows... A pause. You're talking to Dooku. Stark, get out of there now. I'm fine, Tony said. He's not attacking. He doesn't need to attack, Skywalker said. He manipulates. It's what Sith do. Whatever he's telling you, it's designed to serve his agenda. Dooku's expression showed he'd heard the transmission. His senses apparently extended beyond normal human range. General Skywalker, still so certain of the Jedi way, despite your doubts. Tell me, has the Council shared with you the truth about the Chancellor yet? Or are you still kept in the dark, a weapon pointed at enemies you don't understand. I understand you killed my friend. Skywalker's voice came back, cold as vacuum. I understand you lead an army that's slaughtering innocents. And I understand that the moment Stark lowers his guard, you'll strike. Actually, Tony interjected, he's had multiple opportunities and hasn't taken them, which is, I'll admit, not making this easier. He focused on Dooku. You want me to believe the Republic is being manipulated by a hidden Sith, that this whole war is orchestrated, that my technology makes me a target. Fine. Let's say I believe you, and I'm not saying I do. What's your play? Dooku reached slowly into his robes. Tony's weapons tracked the motion and withdrew a small holographic projector. He placed it on the ground between them and activated it. A star map appeared, showing sections of the galaxy Tony didn't recognize. Certain systems pulsed with red indicators. These are separatist holdings, Dooku said. Notice anything unusual? Tony studied the map. Jarvis was already analyzing patterns. They're strategically positioned around key hyperlanes, but there's no unified conquest strategy. It's more like containment positions. Precisely, Dooku said. The Separatists don't hold territory to conquer the Republic. We hold it to maintain the conflict. Every victory I achieve prompts a Republic counteroffensive. Every defeat allows Republic expansion that the Senate then must defend. The war continues, neither side winning decisively, both sides bleeding resources and lives. His voice carried bitter recognition. It's beautiful, really, if you appreciate strategic manipulation, a self-sustaining conflict that generates exactly the conditions someone needs to. He stopped abruptly, his expression shutting down. To what? Tony pressed. To consolidate power, Dooku said after a moment. To justify the erosion of freedoms in the name of security. To position themselves as the indispensable leader when the crisis finally ends. He deactivated the hologram. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending I'm blameless. I've made choices that haunt me, but I recognize a trap when I'm in one, Mr. Stark. The question is, do you? Tony's sensors detected incoming ships, Republic gunships moving fast. Skywalker had called for backup. The conversation was ending whether Dooku wanted it to or not. Last chance, Dooku said, his hand moving toward his lightsaber hilt. Not threatening, just ready. Come with me. See the separatist worlds. Meet systems that fight for independence, not conquest. Learn the truth that the Republic won't share. And in return, I'll give you access to scientists and facilities that can help you find your way home, without the Jedi Council's restrictions. And if I refuse? Then we'll meet again under less cordial circumstances, Dooku said. And next time, Mr. Stark, I won't talk. I'll simply take what I need. The gunships were 30 seconds out. Tony had to choose. Stay with the Republic, whose Jedi Council didn't trust him, and whose government wanted his technology, or take a chance on a Sith Lord who might be telling the truth, or might be the galaxy's most sophisticated liar. Stark! Skywalker's voice was closer now, the young Jedi probably sprinting across rooftops. Answer me! Tony looked at Dooku, at the calm certainty in the Count's eyes, and made his choice. I'm staying with the Republic, Tony said. Not because I trust them completely, but because I don't know you at all, and trading one prison for another isn't freedom. Dooku nodded, unsurprised. A reasonable decision. But remember our conversation, Mr. Stark, when the Republic's true face reveals itself. Remember that I offered you truth, and they offered you chains. He ignited his lightsaber, a crimson blade that hummed with barely contained violence. And remember, the Force is real, your armor is not invincible, and the next time we meet, I'll be taking you alive whether you choose to cooperate or not. He moved, not toward Tony but backward, leaping onto his ship with impossible grace as it accelerated away. Tony's targeting systems locked on, but Dooku was already inside, the ship's shields activating as it dove into Coruscant's chaotic traffic patterns. Skywalker landed on the platform a moment later, his lightsaber blazing, Ahsoka and a squad of clone troopers behind him. Did he hurt you? What did he say? Tony's mind was reeling, processing the conversation, weighing truths against lies. He said a lot of things. Some of them might even be true. That's how Sith operate, Ahsoka said, her young face grim. Mix truth with lies until you can't tell which is which. Yeah, Tony said, watching Dooku's ship disappear into the vertical cityscape. That's what worries me. Because somewhere in that conversation, Tony Stark had felt something he rarely experienced. Doubt. Not about his abilities or his technology, but about the simple binary of good guys versus bad guys that should have made this choice easy. The Clone Wars weren't simple, and the longer Tony stayed in this galaxy, the more complicated they were going to become. The Republic military facility on Camino was unlike anything Tony had seen in his brief time in the Star Wars galaxy. Built on massive stilts above an endless ocean, the complex stretched for miles, a monument to industrial-scale biological engineering. Rain hammered the viewports in sheets, driven by winds that made even Tony's armor-assisted balance systems work overtime. This is where they make the clones, Skywalker explained as they walked through sterile white corridors. Every trooper fighting for the Republic comes from here. Millions of them, all based on the genetic template of a bounty hunter named Jango Fett. Tony's HUD tracked the Kaminoan scientists moving past, tall, graceful beings with elongated necks and eyes that suggested adaptation to aquatic environments. They observed him with clinical interest, their expressions unreadable. They're staring, Tony noted. You're the first human in advanced armor they've seen who isn't a clone, Ahsoka said. To them, you're a walking research opportunity. They want to study me. Everyone wants to study you, Skywalker said dryly. Welcome to my life. The Council's been studying me since I was 9. They'd come to Camino for 2 reasons. First, because the facility housed some of the Republic's most advanced scientists and engineers, people who might help Tony understand the dimensional rift that brought him here. Second, because 3 days ago, separatist forces had launched a major offensive toward Camino, clearly attempting to destroy the Republic's clone production capacity, and Tony was beginning to suspect that attack wasn't a coincidence. Mr. Stark, a Kaminoan named Lama Su approached, his voice carrying the lilting accent of his species. We've reviewed the data you provided on your arc reactor technology. Fascinating work. Though I must confess, our expertise lies in genetic engineering, not exotic energy generation. However, I believe we can assist with your primary concern. Finding a way home, Tony said. Precisely. Lama Su gestured toward a laboratory where holographic star charts rotated in 3 dimensions. Your description of the dimensional breach suggests interaction with what we call hyperspace, the alternate dimension through which faster-than-light travel occurs. If your technology accidentally bridged the gap between your universe and ours via hyperspace, then theoretically you could reverse the process. Theoretically, Tony repeated. What's the catch? Hyperspace is not uniform, another scientist, a human woman with graying hair and Republic insignia, explained. She introduced herself as Dr. Sion Verbol, one of the Republic's leading physicists. It contains anomalies, gravitational shadows, and phenomena we still don't fully understand. Navigating it requires precise calculations and specialized equipment. Creating a deliberate interdimensional breach would require energy expenditures beyond anything currently available. Tony's arc reactor hummed quietly in his chest. Define energy expenditures. Dr. Bowles' eyes widened as she accessed data. Your armor's power output is extraordinary. Based on these readings, a sustained burst at maximum capacity might be sufficient, but you'd need a hyperdrive system calibrated to incredibly specific frequencies. Dimensional coordinates we'd have to calculate from your original entry point, and, she paused, and you'd need to survive the transit. The gravitational shear alone would tear apart most starships. But not my armor, Tony said, understanding. It's built to handle re-entry from orbit, sustained high-G maneuvers, and direct weapons impacts. If we can build the dimensional gateway, I can survive the transit. If we can calculate the correct coordinates, Dr. Boll emphasized. Which brings us to our second problem. We need data from your entry point. The Battle of Christophsis was chaotic. Republic sensors were focused on the Separatist fleet, not on anomalous hyperspace readings. Jarvis recorded everything, Tony said. Every sensor reading, every quantum fluctuation, every electromagnetic signature from the moment we entered this universe. Will that help? Dr. Boll's expression transformed into something approaching religious awe. That would be extraordinary, With that data, I could potentially map the dimensional breach structure. But Mr. Stark, even with perfect calculations, the odds of successfully recreating a one-time interdimensional accident are terrible, Tony finished. Yeah, I figured. But terrible odds are better than no odds. A klaxon suddenly shrieked through the facility. Red emergency lighting bathed the corridors, and a mechanical voice announced in Kaminoan, "Alert! Separatist fleet emerging from hyperspace. All defense stations activate. Republic forces engage immediately." Skywalker's comlink erupted with urgent chatter. Multiple signatures. Grievous's flagship confirmed. They're deploying Trident-class assault ships. They're attacking during a thunderstorm, Ahsoka said, racing toward the viewport. The visibility is terrible. They're using the weather for cover. Tony's tactical systems were already analyzing the situation. His sensors cut through the rain and darkness, showing him what the Kaminoan's equipment couldn't. Dozens of massive ships descending through the storm, disgorging landing craft filled with battle droids. The Republic's defense fleet was scrambling, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. "This is a decapitation strike," Tony said. "They're not here to win a pitched battle. They're here to destroy specific targets fast and withdraw before Republic reinforcements arrive." The cloning facility, Skywalker realized. If Grievous destroys them, the Republic loses its primary source of troops. Or, Tony said slowly, a dark suspicion forming, someone wants to make sure I don't leave this galaxy. Dr. Bowl, how many people knew I was here? She blanched. The project was classified, but Jedi Council members were briefed. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine requested updates. Certain senators with security clearance. So potentially dozens of people, Tony said, any one of whom could be a separatist spy. Or, Skywalker said quietly, meeting Tony's eyes, someone who doesn't want you finding a way home. Someone who wants to keep you here, trapped in this conflict, until you're forced to choose a side. The implications hung in the air like the facility's warning klaxons. If someone in the Republic had leaked Tony's location to Grievous, it meant Dooku's conspiracy theory wasn't entirely paranoia. It meant the corruption went deep enough to orchestrate attacks on the Republic's own vital facilities. "We don't have time for politics," Ahsoka said, her lightsabers already in hand. "Grievous is coming, and this facility can't hold against a sustained assault. We need to defend it or evacuate." "The clones," Skywalker said. "There are thousands of developing clones in the growth chambers. We can't evacuate them all." Tony's HUD showed the tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. The Separatist landing craft were touching down, disgorging battle droids by the thousands. The Republic's clone defenders were outnumbered 5-1 and dropping fast. This was a losing battle. Any military analyst could see it. The smart play was to evacuate key personnel, destroy critical data, and retreat. But Tony Stark had never been particularly smart about self-preservation. "Jarvis," he said, "how much charge do we have?" 97%, sir. Full combat capacity for approximately 4 hours of sustained operations." 4 hours, Tony repeated. "Okay, that's enough." He turned to Skywalker. "Get Dr. Bowl and her team somewhere safe. Secure the dimensional research data. Protect the cloning facilities if you can, but prioritize the scientists. They're the only ones who can actually get me home." "What are you going to do?" Skywalker asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. Tony's repulsors powered up, lifting him off the ground. His weapon systems cycled through activation sequences, and targeting matrices overlaid his vision. "I'm going to remind General Grievous why attacking a facility where I'm working is a really bad idea." "Stark!" Skywalker grabbed his arm, or tried to. His hand slipped off the armor's smooth surface. "Grievous isn't like Dooku. He's not here to talk or manipulate. He's a killing machine with 4 lightsabers and tactical programming designed by the best military minds in the Separatist movement. He's killed dozens of Jedi." "Good thing I'm not a Jedi then," Tony said. His faceplate snapped down, the HUD lighting up with target-rich environment warnings. "I'm something he's never fought before." Tony rocketed through the corridor, his sensors guiding him toward the main hangar, where the heaviest fighting was already underway. Behind him, he heard Skywalker shouting orders to Ahsoka and the clone commanders, coordinating the defense. The hangar was chaos. Battle droids, the standard tan-colored models Tony had seen in battle recordings, poured from landing craft, their blasters filling the air with red energy bolts. Clone troopers fought from cover positions, their white armor already scorched and blood-spattered. And in the center of the carnage stood a figure that made Tony's threat assessment systems spike into red. General Grievous was a nightmare of metal and organic tissue, a towering cyborg with 4 arms, each capable of wielding a lightsaber with lethal precision. His mechanical body moved with spider-like grace, and his eyes burned with cold hatred. He was currently fighting 3 clone troopers simultaneously, his stolen lightsabers, blue and green, taken from dead Jedi, cutting through armor like tissue paper. Tony didn't announce himself, didn't give a speech, didn't offer Grievous a chance to surrender. He simply opened fire. Repulsor beams lashed out from both palms, striking Grievous's back with enough force to send the cyborg stumbling forward. The clone troopers scattered, recognizing Republic intervention. Grievous spun, all 4 eyes locking onto Tony with instant recognition. The outsider, Grievous's voice was a mechanical rasp that somehow conveyed malicious satisfaction. Count Dooku told me about you. He said you were resourceful. One of his arms detached at the shoulder, splitting apart to reveal a blaster carbine built into his forearm. Let's see how resourceful you are against someone built for war. Grievous opened fire with 2 hands while charging with his lightsabers in the other 2. It was an attack pattern designed to overwhelm Jedi reflexes, multiple threats from multiple vectors, each lethal, all simultaneous. But Tony wasn't a Jedi. He didn't need to deflect with a lightsaber. He had energy shields that flickered to life, absorbing the blaster fire while his repulsors kicked him sideways. Grievous's lightsaber strike, meant to bisect Tony at the waist, missed by inches. Tony countered with a micro-missile from his shoulder pod. Grievous twisted impossibly, his mechanical body bending at angles that would snap organic spines. The missile detonated against the hangar wall, and Grievous was already closing again, all 4 arms striking from different angles. Your armor is impressive, Grievous said, his strikes coming faster than human eyes could track. But metal can be cut, and I have killed many who wore protective shells. A lightsaber blade scraped across Tony's chest plate, leaving a glowing orange scar. Alarms shrieked. The blade's plasma field was interacting badly with his armor's composite materials. Another strike from a different angle forced Tony to boost upward, using vertical space the way he'd learned fighting in Manhattan. Jarvis, analysis. Can the armor withstand sustained lightsaber contact? Negative, sir. The plasma blade operates at approximately 25,000 degrees Celsius. Extended contact will compromise hull integrity. Recommend maintaining distance and utilizing range superiority. Right. Stay away from the lightsaber-wielding murderbot. Solid plan. Tony unleashed his full arsenal. Palm repulsors fired in alternating sequences, forcing Grievous to defend instead of attack. Mini-missiles streaked from shoulder pods, creating a perimeter of explosions that limited the cyborg's movement. And when Grievous tried to close the distance again, Tony hit him with a chest-mounted unibeam, a concentrated beam of arc reactor energy that struck Grievous square in his mechanical torso. The cyborg flew backward, crashing through a landing craft and emerging from the other side trailing sparks. But he was laughing, a horrible mechanical sound that echoed through the hangar. Yes, Grievous roared, his damaged torso already compensating with backup systems. Finally, someone who fights like they mean it. The Jedi are too restrained, too limited by their precious code. But you're a warrior. He charged again, and this time Tony saw the tactical pattern. Grievous wasn't just attacking randomly, he was learning. Each exchange taught the cyborg more about Tony's capabilities, his reaction times, his weapons range. Grievous was a combat computer wrapped in metal and rage, and he was adapting faster than any human opponent could. This wasn't going to be a quick fight. This was going to be a war of attrition. And behind Grievous, through the hangar entrance, Tony could see more landing craft descending through the storm. More droids, more weapons. The Separatists were committed to this assault, which meant Tony needed to commit to something more than just defense. All right, Tony said, his arc reactor flaring brighter as he diverted more power to weapon systems. You want to see what I can really do? Let's dance. The Battle of Kamino was turning into a meat grinder. Tony had fought in urban environments before. New York, Sokovia, even the brief nightmare in Afghanistan. But this was different. The Kaminoan facility's narrow corridors and rain-slick platforms created a three-dimensional battlefield where every surface was a potential ambush point, and the storm reduced visibility to near zero for everyone except him. Grievous was relentless. The cyborg general had abandoned his initial caution and was fighting with the kind of calculated fury that spoke of centuries of combat experience compressed into mechanical reflexes. His four lightsabers wove a deadly lattice of plasma, and his ability to rotate his torso independently of his legs created attack angles that shouldn't exist. Tony rocketed backward, using a repulsor burst to gain altitude. Three clone troopers, led by Commander Colt, were holding a defensive position near the cloning facility's main entrance. Battle droids were trying to flank them through a maintenance corridor. Jarvis, missile targeting. Those droids, tight grouping pattern. Acknowledged, sir. Four micro-missiles deployed simultaneously, tracking separate targets with independent guidance systems. They detonated in a precise sequence that collapsed the maintenance corridor, burying the droids under tons of Kaminoan architecture. Nice shooting, Iron Man, Commander Colt shouted over the comm, his voice competing with blaster fire. But we've got bigger problems. Grievous is cutting through our defensive line like it's not even there. Tony knew. His sensors tracked Grievous carving through two more clone troopers, their bodies falling in pieces that made Tony's stomach turn despite years of combat experience. These men were soldiers, professionals who'd accepted the risks. But they were also living beings, sentient, thinking people, not expendable resources. The Republic bred them in tanks and sent them to die by the thousands. The thought made Tony's chest tighten with anger he couldn't fully process right now. Fall back to secondary positions, Tony ordered, temporarily assuming tactical command because someone had to coordinate this chaos. Colt, get your men behind the blast doors. I'll draw Grievous off. You can't fight him alone. Ahsoka's voice cut in. She was 3 levels down, fighting her own battle against Aqua droids in the lower platforms. He's killed Jedi Masters. Then it's a good thing I grade on a curve, Tony said, diving toward Grievous. The cyborg saw him coming and actually smiled, a horrible mechanical expression that involved too many metal teeth. Finally, I was beginning to think you'd hide behind your soldiers all day. That's called tactics, Tony said, unleashing a barrage of repulsor fire. You should try it sometime. Grievous dodged with that impossible flexibility, his body contorting as he closed the distance. 2 of his arms fired built-in blasters, while the other 2 swung lightsabers in coordinated arcs. Tony's shields absorbed the blaster fire, but one lightsaber blade kissed his left thruster assembly. Alarms shrieked. Sir, left repulsor array damaged. Flight capabilities reduced to 78%. 78% was still more than Grievous had. Tony used the remaining thrust to spiral upward, then cut power entirely and dropped like a stone. Grievous, expecting continued flight, swung at empty air. Tony reactivated repulsors at the last second, catching himself inches from the platform and firing point-blank into Grievous's midsection. The chest-mounted unibeam carved a molten scar across the cyborg's torso plating, exposing internal mechanisms that sparked and sputtered. Grievous staggered, and for a moment Tony thought he'd actually hurt the monster. Then Grievous laughed again. Damage, pain, limitation. I've transcended all of it. He slammed his fist into the platform, the impact strong enough to crack Duracrete. My body is a weapon, outsider. Yours is flesh protected by metal. And metal breaks. He was right. Tony's armor was sophisticated, advanced beyond anything in this galaxy. But it wasn't invulnerable. The lightsaber damage was accumulating. Small scores and burns that individually meant nothing but collectively suggested a ticking clock. Eventually, something critical would fail. Tony needed an advantage, something Grievous wouldn't expect. Jarvis, emergency query. Can we interface with Republic military networks? Already connected, sir. Republic encryption is remarkably accessible compared to SHIELD protocols. Good. Find me the facility's defensive systems. Power grids, emergency bulkheads, environmental controls, anything I can weaponize. One moment, sir. Accessing. A pause. Available systems found. Shall I provide tactical overlay? Do it. Tony's HUD exploded with new data. Power conduits running through walls, automated defense turrets, offline for some inexplicable reason. And, most interestingly, the facility's maglev cargo transport system. An idea formed. Dangerous, potentially stupid, but creative. Grievous, Tony shouted, backing toward a specific section of the platform. You know what your problem is? Enlighten me, Grievous rasped, stalking forward with predatory patience. You're so focused on direct combat that you forget wars are won with technology. Tony's repulsors fired, propelling him backward over a specific section of platform. Let me demonstrate. Jarvis, activate Maglev Transport Corridor 7, maximum acceleration. Beneath Grievous's feet, the platform section suddenly transformed. Magnetic fields designed to move multi-ton cargo containers at high speed engaged at full power. Grievous, 70% metal by body mass, was yanked sideways with bone-breaking force, his mechanical legs unable to find purchase on the suddenly frictionless surface. The cyborg general shot down the corridor like a missile, crashing through maintenance equipment and emergency barriers. Tony didn't wait to see if it worked. He was already moving toward the cloning facilities, where the real battle would be decided. Skywalker met him at the entrance, his lightsaber deactivated but his expression grim. That was clever, but you only bought us maybe 2 minutes. Grievous doesn't stay down. 2 minutes is enough, Tony said. Dr. Bowl, is she safe? Evacuated to the Republic medical frigate in orbit. Her data and equipment too. Skywalker paused. But Stark, the clones, we can't evacuate them. The growth chambers are delicate. Moving them prematurely would kill thousands. Tony looked through the transparent walls into the massive cloning facility. Rows upon rows of cylindrical chambers stretched into the distance, each containing a developing clone trooper at various stages of growth. Human beings, people who didn't ask to be created for war, who had no choice about their purpose or fate. The Republic's slave army, grown in tanks because democracy found conscription distasteful. How long until they can be safely moved? Tony asked. Months, Skywalker said. For the youngest ones, maybe a year. Then we hold, Tony said simply. We hold until Republic reinforcements arrive. The reinforcements are pinned down 3 systems away, Ahsoka said, arriving with a squad of clone troopers who looked like they'd been through a war zone, which technically they had. The Separatists planned this perfectly. By the time help arrives, this facility will be rubble. Tony's tactical mind was already running calculations. Separatist forces numbered in the thousands. Republic defenders were down to maybe 300 effective combatants. The facility had limited defensive weapons, no orbital support, and structural weaknesses that prolonged fighting would inevitably exploit. By every reasonable metric, they should evacuate and concede the facility. I'm not leaving them, Tony said, gesturing toward the cloning chambers. We're not leaving them. Skywalker studied him with an expression Tony couldn't quite read. You've been in this galaxy less than 2 weeks. These clones aren't your responsibility. You don't owe them anything. Yeah, Tony said. That's exactly why I'm staying. Because someone should defend people who can't defend themselves without calculating the political cost-benefit. Something shifted in Skywalker's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. All right, then we need a plan that doesn't involve all of us dying heroically. I'm working on it, Tony said, his HUD cycling through tactical scenarios. Jarvis, give me facility schematics. Full detail. I want to know every structural weakness, every choke point, every system we can exploit. Schematics loaded, sir. I should note that General Grievous has recovered and is advancing on your position. ETA 90 seconds. Of course he had, because nothing was ever easy. Okay, Tony said, his mind racing. The facility is built on stilts over an ocean. It's basically one massive structure supported by reinforced columns, right? Correct, Skywalker said slowly. But those columns are designed to withstand Category 5 storms and seismic events. You can't bring them down. I'm not trying to bring them down, Tony said. I'm trying to isolate sections. Jarvis, Can we selectively damage the connecting corridors between sections? Turn this facility into separate islands? Theoretically possible, sir. However, it would require precise demolition charges or sustained energy weapon fire at structural stress points. I've got sustained energy weapons, Tony said, his repulsors charging. And we've got clone troopers with thermal detonators. Skywalker, can you coordinate with your men? I need explosives placed at these coordinates. Tony transmitted the data directly. And I need it done in 5 minutes. You're going to section off the cloning facilities, Skywalker realized. Trap them behind destroyed corridors so Grievous can't reach them. Exactly. The Separatists want to destroy the growth chambers. If we make them physically inaccessible without heavy equipment, they'll have to choose between a prolonged siege or withdrawal. Tony's sensors detected Grievous approaching. And while they're deciding, Republic reinforcements might actually arrive. It's a gamble, Ahsoka said. Everything's a gamble, Tony countered. At least this one doesn't involve us all dying in the next 20 minutes. Skywalker made his decision with the kind of instant commitment Tony associated with true military leaders. Rex Colt, get your men to these coordinates. Plant charges. 5-minute countdown. Synchronized detonation. Sir, yes, sir. The clone commanders scattered, their men following with disciplined efficiency. And us? Ahsoka asked. Tony's arc reactor flared as he diverted power to weapon systems. We buy them those 5 minutes. Grievous is coming, and he's probably not in a good mood after my maglev trick. Probably not, Skywalker agreed, igniting his lightsaber. The blue blade cast sharp shadows in the storm-darkened corridor. But 3 against 1 are better odds than we usually get. The facility shook as Grievous crashed through a wall rather than bothering with the door. The cyborg general was damaged. His chest plating was scored and dented. One of his arms moved with a slight hitch. But he was far from defeated. If anything, the damage made him more dangerous. Cornered predators fought hardest. I should have killed you first, Grievous said, all 4 eyes locked on Tony. A mistake I will correct now. You can try, Tony said, his targeting systems painting Grievous with dozens of potential strike points. But fair warning, I'm done playing nice. Grievous attacked, and Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, philanthropist, and now interdimensional warrior, met him head-on. The corridor exploded into violence. Lightsabers clashed against repulsor beams. Blaster fires streaked through rain and smoke. And somewhere in the chaos, a timer counted down toward the detonation that would either save thousands of lives or doom them all. 4 minutes and 53 seconds remaining. 4 minutes and 53 seconds. Grievous moved like death itself. 4 lightsabers spinning in patterns that created a mobile sphere of lethal plasma. Skywalker engaged from the left, his blue blade meeting green in a cascade of sparks. Ahsoka flanked right, her dual lightsabers, one green, one yellow-green, striking at Grievous's less protected joints. And Tony controlled the vertical space, raining down repulsor fire and micro-missiles from above. It should have been enough. 3 highly trained combatants against 1, even if that one was a legendary cyborg killer. But Grievous was good. Your Jedi predictability bores me, Skywalker. Grievous blocked a strike meant for his neck, simultaneously parrying Ahsoka's leg sweep and firing a wrist-mounted blaster at Tony. I've fought your kind for years. I know every form, every technique, every... Tony interrupted him with a point-blank repulsor blast that sent the cyborg staggering into a wall. Great speech, really intimidating. Now shut up and lose. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Jarvis, status on those explosives? Clone forces have placed charges at 70% of designated coordinates, remaining charges being deployed now. However, sir, I must note that General Grievous is adapting to your attack patterns at an alarming rate. Tony saw it too. The cyborg was learning, tracking Tony's flight paths, predicting his firing solutions, even beginning to anticipate when Jarvis would deploy countermeasures. It was like fighting an AI that improved with every exchange. Skywalker, we need to end this fast. Working on it. Skywalker launched himself into a spinning attack that should have been impossible without Force assistance, and probably was. His lightsaber carved a bright arc through the air, forcing Grievous to commit 3 of his 4 arms to defense. Ahsoka used the opening to strike low, her blade cutting through one of Grievous's leg servos. The cyborg stumbled, and for a heartbeat, Tony had a clear shot at his central processor core. He took it. The uni-beam lanced out from his chest, a concentrated column of arc reactor energy that could punch through reinforced steel. It struck Grievous's torso dead center, right where Jarvis had identified the cyborg's organic brain case, the one piece of him that was still truly alive. The beam burned through armor plating, melted internal components, and created a hole Tony could have fit his fist through. Grievous screamed, a horrible mechanical shriek of pain and rage, and kept fighting. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. "How is he still standing?" Ahsoka shouted, barely deflecting a strike that would have taken her head off. "Redundant systems," Tony realized with growing horror. "His brain isn't where I thought it was." "Jarvis, full body scan. Find the organic components." "Scanning, sir. Multiple possibilities detected. The cyborg's design deliberately obscures vital areas." Grievous was retreating now, backing toward the cloning facility's main entrance. His damaged body was sparking and trailing fluid that might have been coolant or synthetic blood, but his eyes burned with undiminished hatred. "You cannot win," Grievous rasped. "Even if you defeat me, the Separatist fleet will destroy this facility. Your Republic will lose its precious clone production. The war will turn." "Maybe," Skywalker said, his voice hard, "but you won't be alive to see it." Grievous laughed, that terrible mechanical sound. "I've died before, Jedi. Count Dooku rebuilt me. The Separatist scientists restored me. I am beyond death." 2 minutes, 10 seconds. Tony's sensors detected the charges were in place. All of them. 97 thermal detonators positioned at precise structural points, ready to sever the corridors between the cloning facilities and the rest of the complex. Once detonated, the chambers would be isolated, safe behind collapsed corridors and twisted metal that would take hours to cut through. But Grievous was still between them and the safe zone. "Skywalker," Tony said quietly over a private comm channel, "when I give the signal, you and Ahsoka run for the cloning facility entrance. Get behind the blast doors." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," Tony lied. Skywalker's eyes narrowed. "You're planning something stupid." "I prefer tactically inadvisable," Tony said. "Jarvis, when the charges blow, I want full power to repulsors and shields. We're going to be in the blast radius." "Sir, that is." "Stupid, yeah, I heard. Do it anyway." 1 minute, 30 seconds. Grievous seemed to sense something was wrong. His mechanical head swiveled, those 4 eyes taking in the corridor, the structural weaknesses, the thermal detonators that clone troopers had tried so hard to hide. His combat programming connected the pieces in microseconds. "A demolition trap," Grievous said. "Clever, but insufficient." He began moving toward the nearest charge, clearly intending to disarm or destroy it. Tony couldn't let that happen. "Hey, Rust Bucket!" Tony rocketed forward, abandoning range superiority for close combat, the one place where Grievous held every advantage. "Let's see how you handle this." He tackled Grievous. Not a repulsor strike, not a missile. Physical contact, armor against metal chassis, the kind of brawling that Tony had learned fighting the Hulk and Thor. His suit's enhanced strength, powered by the arc reactor's limitless energy, let him grapple with a cyborg that shouldn't have been grappleable. They crashed through a viewport, out into the storm. 50 seconds. Rain hammered Tony's armor as they fell, locked together, tumbling through Kamino's violent atmosphere. Grievous's lightsabers slashed at Tony's back, carving molten scores across his shoulder plates. Alarms screamed about hull integrity, but Tony didn't let go. "Jarvis, calculate trajectory. Where are we landing?" "The ocean, sir. Impact in 12 seconds. "Can the armor handle it?" "At this velocity, marginally." 30 seconds until detonation. They hit the water like a meteor strike. The impact rattled Tony's teeth despite the armor's inertial dampeners. Dark water surrounded them, and for a moment Tony couldn't tell which way was up. His sensors showed Grievous still struggling, those mechanical arms pulling free of Tony's grip. The cyborg's eyes glowed in the murky depths, fixing on Tony with pure hatred. Then Grievous kicked off, using rocket boosters in his legs to propel himself back toward the surface, back toward the facility. 20 seconds. Tony gave chase, his damaged repulsors straining to match Grievous's speed. They broke the surface simultaneously, water streaming off metal and armor. The facility loomed above them, and Tony could see Skywalker and Ahsoka behind the blast doors, safe in the cloning chamber. Grievous saw it too, saw his objective slipping away, made a choice. The cyborg general changed trajectory mid-flight, abandoning the cloning facilities entirely. Instead, he rocketed toward one of the facility's main support columns, the reinforced structures that held the entire complex above the ocean. "He's going to bring down the whole facility," Ahsoka's voice screamed over the comm. "If he destroys a support column..." 10 seconds. Tony's mind raced through possibilities. He could stop Grievous, maybe. Intercept him. Fight him. Try to prevent the cyborg from reaching the column. But that would take time they didn't have. The charges were about to blow. And if Tony wasn't behind the blast doors when they did... 5 seconds. Sometimes being a hero meant making impossible choices. Sometimes it meant accepting that you couldn't save everything. Couldn't win perfectly. Couldn't protect everyone. But Tony Stark had never been good at accepting limitations. "Jarvis, redirect all power to repulsors. Emergency acceleration, maximum output." "Sir, that will drain the arc reactor to critical levels. You'll have perhaps 30 seconds of power remaining afterward." "Then we better make them count." Tony became a missile. The arc reactor blazed so bright that it lit up the storm, and his repulsors screamed as they pushed past their design limits. He closed the distance to Grievous in a heartbeat, grabbed the cyborg's leg, and redirected him. Not gently, not carefully, with every ounce of force the armor could generate. Grievous and Tony slammed into the ocean together, away from the support column, away from the facility. They went deep, 10 meters, 20, 30, the pressure increasing with every meter until Tony's hull integrity warnings became a continuous shriek. 0 seconds. The charges detonated. Even underwater, the concussive force was tremendous. The facility's corridors collapsed in precisely calculated sequences, severing connections, creating isolated sections. Debris rained into the ocean, twisted metal, shattered transparent steel, pieces of Kaminoan architecture that had stood for decades. And in the depths, Tony Stark held on to General Grievous as his arc reactor dimmed from blazing white to dull amber. The power was almost gone. 30 seconds, Jarvis had said. Tony had used 28 of them getting here. Grievous struggled in his grip, trying to bring a lightsaber to bear, but Tony had locked his armor's joints in a desperate grapple. The cyborg couldn't break free without leverage, and there was no leverage in open water. "You've doomed yourself for nothing." Grievous's voice was distorted by the water, but his rage was clear. "The facility is still vulnerable. The Separatists will return. This changes nothing." "It changes today," Tony said, his voice barely a whisper as power continued to fade. "Sometimes that's enough." The arc reactor went dark. Systems failed in cascading sequences. Repulsors offline, weapons offline, environmental controls offline. The armor became a tomb, sinking slowly into Kamino's lightless depths. And still Tony held on, refusing to release Grievous even as his oxygen supply ticked down toward zero. Tony Stark had survived a cave in Afghanistan, an alien invasion in New York, and dozens of battles that should have killed him. He'd faced gods and monsters and won through intelligence, determination, and the technology he'd built with his own hands. But even the arc reactor had limits. Even genius had constraints. Even heroes had to breathe. "Sir?" Jarvis's voice was fading, the AI losing power along with everything else. "Sir, I'm detecting Republic, rescue craft, approaching. Hold. Just hold." Tony tried to respond, but his lungs were burning. The armor was locked. He couldn't open it manually without power, couldn't escape, couldn't... A blue lightsaber blade pierced the water next to him, carving through the ocean like it was air. Then hands, force-enhanced hands, grabbed Tony's armor and pulled. Anakin Skywalker's face appeared in Tony's dimming vision, the young Jedi using the Force to create a bubble of air around them, even as they rose through the water. His expression was fierce, determined, refusing to let Tony die. "Not today," Skywalker said, his voice somehow clear despite the water. "You don't get to die today, Stark. We still have too much work to do." They broke the surface. Republic rescue craft were everywhere. Gunships, medical frigates, reinforcements that had finally arrived. Someone was prying Tony's armor open, manually overriding the locks. Air rushed in, sweet and cold and carrying the smell of storm rain. Tony gasped, his lungs drinking it in like water in a desert. Below them, still sinking into the darkness, General Grievous's glowing eyes faded from view. The cyborg would survive, machines like him always did. But the cloning facilities were safe. The charges had worked. Thousands of developing clones would live to fight another day. "Did we win?" Tony asked weakly. "You're alive," Ahsoka said, appearing at Skywalker's side with a medkit. "The clones are safe. The facility is secure. I'd call that a win." Tony's head fell back against the rescue craft's deck. His armor was damaged, his body was exhausted, and his arc reactor was running on fumes. But he'd held the line. Against a Sith Lord's manipulation, a cyborg general's assault, and a galaxy that wanted to use him, Tony had held the line and protected people who couldn't protect themselves. Maybe Dooku had been right about the Republic's corruption. Maybe Skywalker was right about the hidden conspiracy. Maybe the entire Clone Wars were orchestrated by forces Tony didn't understand. But today, at least, Tony had made a choice based on principle instead of politics. Today, he'd been a hero. And as Republic medical personnel began triage procedures while Skywalker coordinated with his commanders, and the storm finally began to break overhead, Tony Stark allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. He'd survived his first major battle in the Star Wars galaxy. The question was, how many more could he survive before this war consumed him entirely? The investigation took 3 weeks of the most careful, paranoid work Tony had ever attempted. No direct surveillance of Palpatine, that would be detected immediately. No obvious data mining that would trigger security alerts. Instead, Tony and Skywalker assembled a puzzle from fragments. Financial records that Jarvis extracted from Republic databases, comm traffic patterns that showed unusual coordination between Senate offices and separatist territories, and historical data about Palpatine's rise to power that revealed convenient coincidences spanning decades. The pattern was there, hidden beneath layers of legitimate governance and political maneuvering, but it was there. "He's been planning this since before the Clone Wars started," Tony said, projecting holographic data in a secure room deep within the temple's archives. A location Skywalker swore was shielded from electronic surveillance and force eavesdropping. "Look at this timeline. Palpatine becomes senator from Naboo 32 years ago. Within a decade, he's Supreme Chancellor. The moment he takes office, the Republic starts encountering unprecedented crises that require emergency powers. The Stark hyperspace war, the Yinchori uprising, corporate disputes in the Outer Rim," Skywalker read from the data. "Each one perfectly timed to justify expanded executive authority." "And then the Clone Wars," Ahsoka added, studying a section of the hologram that showed military procurement. "A conveniently timed clone army appears exactly when the Republic needs one. An army with built-in loyalty programming and secret contingency orders." "Not just loyalty programming," Tony corrected, highlighting a specific data packet Jarvis had extracted from Kaminoan medical files. "Inhibitor chips, biological control devices implanted in every clone's brain during development. The Kaminoans claim they're to control aggressive behavior, but the programming includes activation codes for dozens of contingency orders, including Order 66. The room went silent as they all processed the implications. Every clone trooper in the Republic military, millions of soldiers scattered across the galaxy, carried hardware that could turn them into sleeper agents with a single transmitted code. "This is what Dooku was trying to tell me," Tony said. "The war serves someone's agenda. Both sides are being manipulated, and the end game is..." He paused, working through the logic. "The end game is wiping out the Jedi while Palpatine consolidates absolute power under the guise of emergency wartime leadership." "We have to tell the Council," Ahsoka said. "Show them this evidence." "It's not enough," Skywalker said grimly. "This is all circumstantial. Financial irregularities could be explained as wartime corruption. The inhibitor chips have documented medical purposes. Even the contingency orders have legitimate security justifications. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We need direct proof that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, and that's impossible to get without exposing ourselves, Tony finished. Yeah, I've run the scenarios. Every approach that gets us real proof also alerts Palpatine that we're investigating him. And if he knows we know, he activates Order 66 immediately, Skywalker said. The Jedi Order gets wiped out, we get killed as traitors, and Palpatine consolidates power with no opposition. Game over. Tony's arc reactor pulsed in his chest, a steady rhythm that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. He'd been in impossible situations before, trapped in a cave with a car battery wired to his heart, facing down an alien army with a nuke and no way home. Fighting Thanos with half the universe already dead. But this felt different. This wasn't about personal survival or even planetary survival. This was about preventing the complete domination of an entire galaxy by a tyrant who'd been orchestrating his rise to power for decades. There might be another option, Tony said slowly, an idea forming. We can't prove Palpatine is a Sith without exposing ourselves. But we don't need to prove it to everyone. We just need to prove it to enough people that Order 66 becomes inoperative. I don't follow, Ahsoka said. The inhibitor chips, Tony explained, his mind racing as the plan crystallized. They're biological hardware with software programming, which means they can be hacked, disabled, or reprogrammed. If we could remove them from enough clones, quietly, without alerting Palpatine, then Order 66 would fail when he tries to activate it. Skywalker's eyes lit up with understanding. The clones would still be loyal to their Jedi commanders. The attempted betrayal would be obvious to every clone whose chip was disabled. They'd know someone tried to turn them into assassins. And they'd want to know who, Tony continued, which leads the investigation directly back to Palpatine and the Kaminoans who installed the chips under his secret orders. The conspiracy unravels not because we expose it, but because his own weapon fails to fire. There are millions of clones, Ahsoka pointed out. We can't possibly remove chips from all of them, not without years and resources we don't have. We don't need all of them, Tony said. We need enough. Key battalions. Clones stationed near critical locations. Coruscant, Camino, major Republic installations. If we can disable chips in even 30% of the clone army, Order 66 becomes a chaotic disaster instead of a coordinated purge. The Jedi would have warning, would have allies, would have a fighting chance. Skywalker paced, his tactical mind clearly working through the logistics. Commander Rex, Captain Cody, the 501st, the 212th, units I trust personally. If we could convince their commanders to undergo routine medical screening that happens to include chip removal, he nodded slowly. It could work, but we'd need surgical equipment, medical personnel we can trust, and a cover story that doesn't alert Palpatine. I can handle the equipment, Tony said. Jarvis and I can build a portable chip removal device based on Kaminoan medical technology. Disguise it as an armor repair station or weapons diagnostic unit. Something that wouldn't look suspicious if clone commanders were seen entering. And the medical personnel? Ahsoka asked. We don't need many, Tony said. 1 or 2 sympathetic medical droids, maybe a clone medic who asks the right questions and sees the evidence himself. Once the first few chips are removed and examined, the clones will understand what was done to them. They'll want them out. It becomes voluntary, informed consent instead of conspiracy. Master Yoda needs to know about this, Skywalker said firmly. Even if we can't prove Palpatine is a Sith, we can prove the chips exist and represent a security vulnerability. That's enough to justify removal on military grounds alone. Tony hesitated. Bringing Yoda in meant expanding the circle of knowledge, increasing the risk of leaks. But Skywalker was right. They needed someone with council authority to legitimize the chip removal operation. All right, Tony agreed. We bring Yoda in, but carefully. Private audience, no records, no witnesses. Master Yoda's personal meditation chamber was small, austere, and somehow felt older than time itself. The ancient Jedi Master sat on a simple cushion, his eyes closed, his breathing barely perceptible. Tony, Skywalker, and Ahsoka stood before him, waiting. Finally, Yoda's eyes opened. Troubled you are. All three. Feel it, I do. Master Yoda, Skywalker began, we've discovered something about the clone army. Something the Council needs to know. About inhibitor chips, you speak, Yoda said calmly. Know of them, I do. Medical necessity, the Kaminoans claimed. Accepted their explanation, the Council did. Tony stepped forward. With respect, Master Yoda, they lied. We've analyzed the chip's programming. They contain contingency orders, including one designated Order 66 that would compel clones to execute their Jedi commanders on remote activation. Yoda's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Evidence of this, you have? Tony transmitted the data files directly to Yoda's personal holopad. Financial records, technical specifications, programming protocols. The ancient Jedi studied them with an attention that suggested he was processing far more than just the surface information. Disturbing? This is, Yoda said finally, but prove evil intent, it does not. Security measure against rogue Jedi, such an order might be. Dark times these are. Trust even fellow Jedi. The Republic cannot always. That's exactly the problem, Tony said, frustration bleeding into his voice. The Republic has been conditioned to accept authoritarian security measures because of this war. Emergency powers, loyalty chips, contingency orders to kill Jedi. Each step seems reasonable in isolation, but together they form a mechanism for complete totalitarian control. Fear the path to the dark side it is, Yoda said, his gaze fixing on Tony with uncomfortable intensity. Afraid for the Jedi you are. Afraid of betrayal. Afraid of failure to protect. I'm afraid I'm right, Tony said flatly. And I'm afraid that by the time you have undeniable proof, it'll be too late to act. Yoda was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made even Tony's armor feel inadequate. Suspected infiltration at the highest levels I have. Clouded, the Force has become. Hidden, something is. But without proof, act rashly I cannot. Accuse the Supreme Chancellor of treason without evidence? Destroy the Republic that would. Create the very tyranny we seek to prevent. So we do nothing? Ahsoka asked, disbelief in her voice. Did I say that? Yoda's ears twitched with something that might have been amusement. No. Investigate, we will. But carefully, wisely. Remove inhibitor chips from loyal commanders we shall. Medical grounds we will cite. Security vulnerability we will claim. Opposition from the Chancellor we may encounter. But if oppose medical safety of Republic soldiers he does, reveal his true priorities that will. It wasn't the aggressive action Tony wanted, but it was more than he'd expected. Yoda was playing politics, creating plausible deniability while taking concrete steps to counter the threat. I'll begin building the chip removal equipment immediately, Tony said, disguised as medical diagnostic tools. It'll take maybe a week. And I'll speak with Commander Rex, Skywalker added. If he agrees to the procedure voluntarily and the chip's true purpose is revealed, other clones will follow. It'll spread through the ranks organically. Organic, yes, Yoda agreed. Forced, no. Free will, even manufactured soldiers must have. Prove their humanity through choice, they will. He turned to Tony specifically. And you, Mr. Stark, home you wish to find. Helped you, the Republic should have. Interfered, the Council did. Apologize for this, I do. The apology caught Tony off guard. In his experience, powerful institutions didn't admit fault. They rationalized, deflected, or doubled down on mistakes. Dr. Bowles' dimensional research continues, Yoda said. Access to all Republic scientific facilities you now have. My authorization, this carries. Find your way home you may. But first, his expression grew grave. Help us prevent catastrophe, you must. Bridge between Jedi and technology, you are. Perspective we lack, you provide. Need you, the Force does. The Force doesn't need me, Tony said. I can't even sense it. Wrong you are, Yoda said, and now he smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. The Force in all things flows. Even you, Tony Stark. Even technology you build. Connected we all are. Through different paths, perhaps, but towards same destination, we walk. It was possibly the most optimistic thing anyone had said to Tony since he'd arrived in this galaxy. And standing in that meditation chamber with two Jedi who'd become allies and an ancient master who saw potential where others saw threat, Tony felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, not certainty. He was too much of a realist for that. But hope that maybe, just maybe, they could prevent Palpatine's endgame. That maybe the Jedi Order could survive. That maybe this galaxy could be saved from tyranny. And that maybe when all of this was over, Tony Stark could find his way home with the knowledge that he'd made a difference in a universe that wasn't even his own. All right, Tony said, let's save the galaxy. One inhibitor chip at a time. 3 months later, the chips had been removed from 47% of the clone army. The procedure had spread exactly as Yoda predicted, organically through soldier-to-soldier trust, as clones who'd undergone the removal told their brothers what had been hidden in their brains. Some refused removal, claiming it was Republic-mandated safety equipment, but most chose freedom over programming, humanity over manufactured loyalty. Tony was in his workshop, a repurposed temple maintenance bay, when the alert came. "Sir," Jarvis said, his voice urgent, "I'm detecting encrypted transmissions on Palpatine's private channels. The pattern matches activation protocols for contingency orders." Tony's blood turned to ice. "He's activating Order 66. Partial activation detected in clone units whose inhibitor chips remain functional. However," Jarvis paused, and if an AI could sound satisfied, he did. "Response rate is 41%, insufficient for coordinated purge." Across the galaxy, the conspiracy was unraveling. Jedi who'd removed their commander's chips fought alongside loyal clones against those still controlled by programming. Jedi whose battalions still had chips activated were dying, betrayed by soldiers they'd fought beside for years. But they died with warnings transmitted, with emergency protocols engaged, with the truth finally exposed. And on Coruscant, in the Senate building, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's carefully constructed plan collapsed as the Jedi Council, forewarned, prepared, and supported by loyal clone commanders, moved to arrest him. Tony suited up, his repaired armor gleaming in the workshop's harsh lights. Skywalker and Ahsoka were already en route to the Senate, supported by Commander Rex and the 501st. Yoda had taken personal command of the Temple's defense. The Clone Wars were ending, not with a peace treaty or diplomatic resolution, but with a revelation that would reshape the Republic entirely. And Tony Stark, the man who'd accidentally crashed into this galaxy seeking only to find a way home, was right in the center of it all. His arc reactor hummed to life, power flooding through systems that had been built in a cave and perfected in a workshop. Technology from one universe adapting to save another. "Jarvis, plot the fastest route to the Senate building. We've got a Sith Lord to help arrest." "Course plotted, sir. And might I say, this is precisely the sort of dramatic climax that stories are made of." "Yeah," Tony said, launching into Coruscant's sky lanes as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "Let's just make sure it's got a happy ending." The battle for the Republic's soul had begun. And win or lose, Tony Stark was going to make damn sure people remembered that sometimes the greatest power in the galaxy came not from the Force, but from courage, ingenuity, and the simple choice to do what was right. The arrest of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, revealed to be Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, sent shockwaves through the Republic that would take years to fully process. The conspiracy was deeper than even Tony had suspected. Tentacles of corruption reaching into every level of government, military, and commerce. Count Dooku, confronted with evidence of his master's betrayal and manipulation, surrendered to Republic custody, providing testimony that helped dismantle the remaining separatist leadership. The Clone Wars ended not with a bang, but with a reckoning. The separatist movement, stripped of Sith manipulation, collapsed into negotiations. Systems with legitimate grievances were heard, reforms were implemented. The Republic began the painful process of becoming what it had always claimed to be, a true democracy, not a facade concealing authoritarian control. The clone army faced its own crisis of identity. Were they citizens, soldiers, property? The question consumed Senate debates for months. But Tony's chip removal operation had provided an answer more powerful than any legal definition. The clones were people, capable of choice, deserving of rights, entitled to futures beyond military service. Commander Rex became an advocate for clone rights, his testimony about the inhibitor chips forcing the Republic to confront its own complicity in creating a slave army. Some clones chose to remain soldiers in a reformed military. Others pursued civilian lives, education, families. The transition was messy, imperfect, and incomplete. But it was happening. And Tony Stark, with Dr. Bowles' finally completed dimensional calculations and a heavily modified Republic hyperdrive system, stood on the observation deck of a research station at the edge of known space, preparing to attempt what might be his final act in this galaxy. "The calculations are solid," Dr. Bowles said, her hands trembling slightly as she ran final checks. "The dimensional rift should open exactly where you entered. But Mr. Stark, the energy requirements are immense. Even your arc reactor might not—" "It'll hold," Tony said with more confidence than he felt. His armor had been rebuilt with Kaminoan alloys, reinforced with materials from a dozen worlds, and integrated with Republic technology that Jarvis had spent months adapting. It was no longer purely the armor he'd built in his own universe. It was something new, a hybrid of two realities. Skywalker and Ahsoka stood nearby, neither of them saying much. What was there to say? Tony had become something like family to them, the outsider who'd stayed to fight their war, who'd helped save their order, who'd proven that power didn't have to flow from the Force to matter. "You'll be remembered," Skywalker said finally. "The man in the iron armor who fell from the stars, the one who changed everything." "I'm just a mechanic who got really lucky with a wormhole," Tony said, deflecting as always. "You guys did the hard part. Fighting for what's right even when your own government betrayed you, that takes real courage." "Learned from watching you, we did," Yoda said, appearing at the doorway with his characteristic quiet grace. "Questioned authority, fought for principle, chose people over politics. These lessons the Jedi will remember. Rebuild differently, we shall. Better." Tony knelt, bringing himself to Yoda's eye level, a gesture of respect that the ancient master acknowledged with a small nod. "Keep them safe, Master Yoda. The clones, the Jedi, the Republic. It's fragile right now. Don't let it break." "Do what we can, we will," Yoda said. "But remember, perfect the galaxy need not be, only better than it was. That standard you have helped us meet." Tony stood, turning toward the modified hyperdrive chamber that would serve as his dimensional gateway. The arc reactor in his chest was already spinning up to maximum output, energy flooding through systems that would channel it into a controlled tear through space-time. "Jarvis, final systems check." "All systems nominal, sir. Arc reactor output at 97% and climbing. Dimensional coordinates locked. I calculate a 73% probability of successful transit. Better odds than when they'd started." Good enough for Tony Stark. He sealed his faceplate, the HUD lighting up with final countdown sequences. Through the viewports, he could see the stars of this alien galaxy, beautiful, distant, and no longer quite as foreign as they'd once been. "Goodbye," Tony said simply. "And thank you. For everything." The hyperdrive engaged. Reality screamed as dimensions folded and tore. The arc reactor burned white-hot, pouring energy into the rift that opened like a wound in space-time. And Tony Stark, encased in armor that was equal parts Earth technology and Star Wars innovation, launched himself into the void between universes. The last thing he saw before the rift closed behind him was Anakin Skywalker raising his hand in farewell, a gesture that was part military salute and part friend saying goodbye to someone he'd never forget. Then there was only light and pressure, and the screaming of dimensions trying to tear him apart. The arc reactor held, the armor held, Tony Stark held, and when he finally crashed through the other side, tumbling into the familiar vacuum above a beautiful blue-green planet he'd thought he might never see again, Jarvis's voice was the first thing he heard. "Welcome home, sir. Earth orbit confirmed. All systems functional. Might I suggest not attempting interdimensional travel again in the immediate future?" Tony laughed, exhausted, relieved, triumphant. "Yeah, Jarvis, I think I'll take your advice on that one." He'd gone to another galaxy, crashed into their war, fought alongside Jedi and clones against Sith in conspiracy, changed the course of galactic history through technology, courage, and stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds. And now, finally, he was home. But Tony Stark knew something the Avengers were about to discover. The genius, billionaire, philanthropist, and occasional interdimensional traveler had learned things in that far galaxy. About leadership, about sacrifice, about fighting for principle even when the whole universe seemed arrayed against you. Earth had no idea what was coming, but for now, in this moment, Tony just enjoyed the view of his homeworld and the knowledge that somewhere, in a galaxy far, far away, heroes would remember the man in the iron armor who'd helped save them all.